"You'll be safe here." That was the last thing my son said before sliding the bolt from the outside, leaving me standing in the cold lobby of Silver Grove Nursing Home. My hands still trembling because I hadn't yet understood what had just happened. My daughter-in-law set my phone on the front desk, smiling at the red-lipped nurse as if she were dropping off a pet, not a 72-year-old mother-in-law. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stood there, listening to my son's footsteps fade along with the sound of the door closing. Separating me from the house where I'd lived more than half my life, the house I thought would be the last place I'd be called Mom. I sat on a plastic chair, took a deep breath to swallow the shame rising in my throat. And when I slid my hand into the pocket of my old coat, my fingertips touched something unfamiliar, a thick, smooth sheet of paper, folded in half. I froze. Not a note, not a receipt. A lottery ticket, still intact. I smiled a small, quiet, bitter smile. They thought they'd just locked me in. What they didn't know was that in that very moment, I had just opened a door to walk myself out to freedom. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Margaret Lane, 72 years old, living in the suburbs of Maine, where autumn paints every road gold and the sea wind blends with the creak of an old porch swing. I used to be an elementary school teacher, and I used to believe that if I lived decently and raised my child well, life would be gentle with me in old age. My husband, Richard, died 10 years ago after a sudden stroke, leaving me with our little house at 12 Elmwood Street, the home we built with every modest dollar we saved. My son, Daniel, was the pride of half my life, a successful engineer, smooth-tongued, and always knowing the right words at the right time. I used to think my son loved his mother. But now, staring at that newly locked door, I understood. Sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive with shouting, but with a practiced hug and a purposeful smile. The front desk nurse, Tiffany, said my name in a voice too sweet to be sincere. "Welcome to Silver Grove, Mrs. Lane. We care for you here like family." "Family?" I answered with a faint smile. "That's good to hear." She didn't notice my voice was shaking not from fear, but from restrained anger. Another staffer, Megan, gathered my handbag and took my keys, wallet, and phone. "We'll hold these for you so they don't get lost." I wanted to ask, "And my dignity, who will hold that for me?" But I stayed silent. When people treat you like a child, pushing back only convinces them more that you need to be controlled. Room 214. A wooden door with peeling paint, a silver doorknob flaking away, a bed tucked so tight you couldn't stretch your legs comfortably. On the windowsill sat a photo of Richard. Someone had placed it there to help me feel at home. But nothing here was home. My home was on Elmwood Street, with the creaky porch swing, the wisteria trellis I planted in 1986, and the white curtains Richard used to complain were so thin everyone can see inside. Now, that house had surely been locked up, or worse, cleared out. I brushed my fingers over Richard's photo. "Honey," I whispered. They moved me like they were packing off an old piece of furniture. In the glass, his smile was still as gentle as ever, and that made my heart ache even more. The first night at Silver Grove, I couldn't sleep. Hallway light leaked through the door crack, rubber soles scraped by non-stop, and someone called weakly for a nurse. "I want to go home." No one answered. Loneliness in those walls was thick, heavy as the smell of bleach. The next morning, Tiffany handed me a schedule. "Mrs. Lane, today we have physical therapy and crafts." I just smiled. No one asked if I wanted to join. Here, freedom isn't in the dictionary. I met Hazel, 88, a former librarian with bright eyes and a raspy voice. She sat in the activity room, hands trembling as she flipped through a worn magazine. "First time here?" she asked. "Yes. No one ever says they want to stay." Hazel sighed. but then they either get used to it or forget. Next to Hazel was Nora, past 90, eyes cloudy and hearing weak, but her memory sharp as a blade. She whispered, "Don't talk too much. Here, they prefer the obedient over the intelligent." I nodded. I filed that advice away. Dinner at Silver Grove is served at 5 p.m. Mashed beans, boiled chicken, and watery potatoes. Hazel smirked. "If you complain, they'll flag your chart as behavioral issues." I tasted it and forced it down. That blandness felt like how they wanted us to exist enough to breathe, not enough to live. All through dinner, I sat quietly, listening to broken stories from people the world had forgotten. One lady talked about her husband, her voice blurring the line between memory and dreams. A man dozed off over his tray. I realized this isn't a place for healing. It's where people set down souls too tired to fight back. When Tiffany cleared the trays, she said, "If you need anything, just press the call button. But don't press it more than 3 times, the system glitches." I nodded and smiled. But in my head, a small plan was forming. If they think I'm just a confused old woman, they won't be on guard. And they're right about one thing. I'll be good. I'll smile. I'll cooperate. But not to settle in here. To buy myself time. On the second night, I slipped my hand into my coat pocket again. The lottery ticket was still there, slightly rough at the edges, but intact. I ran my fingers over the black ink numbers. A thought flashed like lightning. What if this is real? What if fate still has another path for me? I smiled in the dark. I used to teach children that every math problem has a solution. Maybe life does too. They can lock a door, but they can't lock my will. On the third day, I watched Tiffany tend to a woman with dementia, her voice so sweet it was almost fake. When she left, Nora murmured, "Don't trust the smiles here. They're not for you, they're for the report." I smiled and whispered, "I don't trust anyone except myself." That afternoon, Daniel didn't call. He didn't text. I knew he was busy reorganizing my life without me in it. I just wondered, how far along were they in clearing the house? Did they throw away the knitted Christmas scarf I made in 1987? A woman who spent a lifetime caring for others now being reclaimed like a non-performing asset. I stood at the window of room 214, watching rain streak the courtyard. Long water trails slid down the glass, reflecting my face wrinkled, tired, but not finished. I told myself, if fate put this ticket in my hand, there's a reason. And so, in a place built for forgetting, I started to rewrite my story. Not with tears, with silence and calculation. That night, when the clock struck 11 p.m., I heard rain pounding harder outside the window. Hazel slept. Nora wheezed softly in the next room. I sat up, took out the lottery ticket, and studied it under the warm, dim light. To others, those numbers are just chance. To me, they were a symbol of coming back to life. They locked me here because they thought I was weak, forgetful, easy to bend. But they forgot. I raised a child, weathered crises, lost a husband, and still stood up. I smoothed the ticket, folded it carefully, and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I lay down and closed my eyes, letting the night breeze through the door crack. Tomorrow I'd begin not with shouting but with quiet thinking, because when people decide you've lost your value, that's when you're freest to strike back. On the fourth night at Silver Grove, light rain tapped the window while a faint ventilator hummed in the next room. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, watching the hallway light spill through the door crack. Every time a nurse walked by, those rubber soles thudded, steady as the heartbeat of a place that never sleeps. I knew I wouldn't rest. Something in my pocket kept calling me the lottery ticket. When the wall clock reached 12:30 a.m., I got out of bed. The yellow light washed across the cold tile, throwing a thin, ghostly version of me on the floor. I pulled on a cardigan, grabbed my worn reading glasses, and stepped out. The desk was deserted. Only Megan, the night shift nurse, sat glued to her phone, earbuds in, a tiny drumbeat leaking out. I cleared my throat. She startled, tugged out one earbud. "Oh, Mrs. Lane, can't sleep?" "I'm sorry," I rasped, voice like wind. "I need to make a call. It's urgent. I forgot to turn off the heater at home." Megan pursed her lips. "But you don't live there anymore." "I know, but my neighbor keeps a spare key. If I don't call, I'll worry all night." She sighed. "All right, just a few minutes." She pushed the desk phone toward me. My fingers trembled as I dialed. I didn't call a neighbor. I called the Powerball line. A cool, automated voice guided each step. I read the numbers on the ticket, one by one, breathing between entries. The result appeared. I checked again, then a third time, just to be sure I wasn't misreading. Everything matched. I stood still, as if the world had paused. $61.8 million. A number unreal and distant, suddenly small enough to fit in my palm. Not a miracle. An opportunity, and for the first time in years, the choice was mine. Megan glanced up. "Everything okay, Mrs. Lane?" I gave her a calm smile. "All set, thank you. I can sleep now." I went back to my room, heart still pounding. Hazel slept, breathing evenly, her wrinkled face at peace. I sat down, took the ticket from my pocket, and held it under the nightlight's glow. The ink had smudged a little, the paper had softened at the edges, the numbers were still clear. I slid it into an envelope from the drawer, then tucked it under the mattress. No one would know. Not Daniel, not Clara, not anyone. I sat a long time, listening to the rain and thinking about all the years I pinched every dollar and always saved the best for my child. I used to think that was love. But real love never locks the door and takes away your freedom. The next morning, Tiffany came in with a tired smile. "Mrs. Lane, there's a watercolor session today. Very relaxing." "I don't paint," I said softly. "You should try it, helps stabilize your mood." "My mood is stable," I said, eyes on the window. She looked at me for a while and exhaled. "Mr. Keaton, the administrator, is busy this week, but if you need to discuss anything, I can note it down." "I'll wait for him," I said. "I want Persettet to talk face to face." I knew they wouldn't be eager to let me meet anyone outside the treatment schedule, but I had time. And for the first time, time felt like it was on my side. That afternoon, after Tiffany left, I opened the drawer and took out a small brown notebook. I wrote, "Day 6, Powerball numbers fully match. Prize, $61.8 million. Goals, independent attorney, new identity, financial privacy, tell no one, trust no one." I put the pen down and smiled to myself. My hand shook, but the lines stayed straight. Old teachers' habits, the one thing they couldn't take from me. That evening, I watched Hazel slowly cut pictures from an old magazine. "I heard you don't like it here," she murmured. "I don't belong here." "No one belongs here." Hazel looked up, eyes cloudy but deep. "If you want out, learn to disappear from their sight. When they don't look, they don't lock." I nodded. "Let them believe you're badder. Compliant," she went on. "Silence is the invisibility cloak of the old." That sentence echoed in my head all night. I started to observe, not as a victim, but like someone mapping a fortress. From room 214's doorway, I could see cameras at both ends of the hall, but the center was blocked by a big wall clock. From 10 p.m. to midnight, Megan was the only one on duty. She stepped away 3 times, once for meds, once to check the oxygen room, and once, I guess, to sneak a call to her boyfriend. Each time, the hallway emptied. I had no phone, no ID, no bank account. Daniel controlled it all. I remembered the day my husband died. I once told my son, "Don't ever touch the house deed." He put an arm around me and smiled. "I just want to take the worry off your plate, Mom." And that's exactly what happened. I no longer got to worry. They took care of it for me down to my right to live. But that's all right. I had that ticket. And with one ticket, I could rewrite the game. That afternoon, I tried calling Daniel from the hallway phone. Tiffany stood a few steps away, jotting notes and glancing over. I kept my voice steady. "Hi, honey. I just wanted you to know I found something important. Something you'd be interested in." I hung up before he could pick up. Tiffany looked up. "Everything okay?" "Fine. I just wanted to hear my boy's voice." She gave a stiff smile, unaware I'd just planted a seed of doubt in Daniel's mind. That night, when everyone slept, I opened my notebook and added a small line. "Don't let them see you're awake, because at Silver Grove, clarity is a sin. They want you mild, murky, and compliant. But I'd spent a lifetime teaching others to think. I knew. A clear mind is more frightening than a handful of power." I started rehearsing my role. A soft laugh when Tiffany chatted about small things. A nod when Megan asked if the food tasted good. A touch of forgetfulness. What day? Is it again? So they'd relax their guard. I left Richard's photo on the table as a prop of frailty. But in the drawer, beside the notebook, was the plan of someone preparing to strike back. 2 days later, I heard Hazel whisper after the nurse left, "Mrs. Lane, you're different from them. I can see the light in your eyes." I smiled faintly. "Light goes out easily in a place like this." "No," she said, voice thin as thread. "You just have to cover it at the right time." That noon, the rain stopped and sunlight slanted through the window, washing my blanket in pale gold. I lifted my hand and watched the bright flecks dance across my wrinkled skin. Every crease was a chapter of my life, and I realized they can cut the phone, lock the door, but they can't erase the history carved into my hands. I wouldn't scream or plead. I would wait. Wait for the right time, the right person, and the right way to play the card I'd kept hidden. When night fell, I slipped my hand under the mattress again. The envelope was still there, flat, still, quiet. I touched it lightly, like a farmer checking seeds before sowing. Outside, the rain had stopped. Only the wind moved through the narrow door gaps, blowing softly like a reminder. Freedom doesn't disappear. It's just waiting to be named. I closed my eyes, palm on the envelope. In the dark, a thin smile tugged at my lips. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for someone to help me unlock the door. But tonight, only I knew that in this small room, among forgotten people, a 72-year-old woman had just won $61.8 million, and my world would never be the same again. I don't believe in coincidence, but sometimes fate tosses you a small scrap of paper exactly when you need it most. On Wednesday morning, in the common room, I picked up an old newspaper from the pile of torn magazine staff often left behind. On the last page, a small ad in modest type jumped out at me. Benson and Cole. Discreet estate planning for seniors. Absolute confidentiality. First consultation free. I stopped. A small current ran down my spine. Absolute confidentiality. Those words felt written just for me. I folded the clipping, slipped it into my pocket, and looked around. Tiffany was busy checking the med board. Hazel sat dozing by the window. No one noticed. I stood slowly and walked out like an old woman craving fresh air. But my heart pounded so hard I was sure someone could hear it. That afternoon, I headed to the end of the hallway, where the emergency exit led down to the basement. The signal there was weak, but there were no cameras. I'd seen staff smoke there a few times. No one would notice if I stood alone for a few minutes. I took out the clipping and dialed with slightly shaky hands. A calm, professional male voice answered. Benson and Cole Law Offices. This is Andrew Benson. How can I help you? I took a breath. Hello, I'm calling about provision. Setting up a private trust for a senior. I want to keep my identity confidential. Absolutely. May I have your name? I hesitated, then said Martha Lane. Not Margaret. I needed a different name just in case. Pleasure to speak with you, Mrs. Lane, he said. Could you come to our office? No, I replied, firm. I'm at a special care facility. I can only meet here. He was quiet for a few seconds, considering. Then, all right. I can arrange that. Friday, 2:30 p.m. Where shall we meet? In the back garden at Silver Grove. Few people pass through. Understood. I'll be there. The call ended, and I stood still a moment, listening to my heartbeat thud in the tight space. I'd just set the first brick of my freedom. 2 days later, I prepared like someone heading into battle. I washed my hair, combed it neat, and wore an old beige cardigan worn but clean. From the drawer, I took the envelope with the ticket and I checked it again. The paper was flat, uncreased. I slid it into the innermost pocket of my coat, tucked like a treasure. At noon, I told Tiffany I wanted to sit in the garden to get some air while reading. She didn't suspect a thing, only warned, "Don't go beyond the camera area." I nodded and smiled politely. 2:20 p.m. I sat on a weathered concrete bench, pretended to read, and watched the back gate. Sunlight slipped through the leaves, dappling the ground. My heart hammered. At 2:32, a dark blue sedan pulled in. The door opened and a middle-aged man stepped out. Gray suit, blue tie, tall and lean, moving with quiet steadiness. He carried a black leather briefcase. "Mrs. Lane?" he asked gently, eyes calm but intent. I nodded. "Yes, thank you for coming." We chose a small table in the garden, tucked behind the maples. No cameras here, only breeze and far-off birds. "I'm Andrew Benson," he said, opening his case and taking out a notepad. "I specialize in trusts and privacy protection. Could you tell me a bit about your situation?" I glanced around and lowered my voice. "My son controls all my finances. He has power of attorney. I want my identity back. And I have an asset that needs to be protected." Andrew tilted his head, not judging, just listening. "May I see it?" I opened my pocket, drew out the envelope and slid it to him. I found it last week. He opened it. When he saw the lottery ticket, his brow tightened slightly. He snapped a quick photo of the numbers and checked the official site on his phone. In under a minute, he looked up, voice dropping. "Mrs. Lane, this is a winning Powerball ticket. The announced prize is $61.8 million. Even knowing beforehand, my chest still tightened. I pressed my lips together and gave a small nod. "I need you to keep it safe." He pushed up a shirt sleeve and met my eyes. "And I will if you agree to follow every step I lay out. From now on, you may not tell anyone, including family. Do you understand?" "I do. I've been betrayed once. There won't be a second time." Andrew began sketching on a sheet of paper. "First, we verify identity and create a blind trust. That way, no one knows who the real owner is. The name on the paperwork will be Lydia Westfield, fully lawful, completely separate from you. The funds will move into the trust through our office, avoiding legal risk." I watched each stroke of his pen. Every line felt like a door I thought had been locked forever. "Once the money is transferred," he continued, "you can designate beneficiaries. If you want to keep it quiet, only you and I will know." I thought for a moment and said, "I want only one person to benefit." "Who?" "My granddaughter, Emily Ross. She's 21, in college. She's the only one in the family who has never treated me like a burden. Andrew gave a small smile, the rare kind from a portrait. Someone who understands the value of trust. I'll note that. We'll set clear terms. Emily will receive her portion of the trust when she turns 30, or earlier if needed for education and housing. Agreed? I want her to have the right to study, to live, and to never be manipulated the way I was. In that case, he said softly, we'll make it real. After that, he took a few forms from his briefcase. 1 is to establish the identity of Lydia Westfield. 2 is a draft to revoke the current power of attorney your son holds. 3 is a new will, replacing all previous documents. I looked at the first sheet. On the signature line, he wrote in blue ink, Lydia Westfield. He slid the pen toward me. I took it. My hand still trembled, but the stroke was straight and clear. As the ink dried, I felt a small light inside me, the light of the right to be myself. Andrew carefully stacked the papers. I'll keep the originals and send copies to a secure mailbox I set up. Every step will be completed within 72 hours. All you need to do is wait. I asked, what if Daniel finds out? He won't be able to. Everything is done under the name Lydia. Any financial access he has to the old files will be temporarily frozen during review. I nodded. Good. I don't want revenge, but I want him to understand his mother was never stupid. Andrew chuckled lightly. I like the way you put it. Most of my clients just want to hide. You want to stand up. Stand up, I repeated, after they thought I'd fallen. When he left, the afternoon sun stretched across the brick path. I watched the blue car fade from view, my heart oddly lighter. In my coat pocket, the little notebook warmed under my hand. I opened it and added a line. Day 9. Met Andrew Benson. Ticket confirmed. Lydia Westfield trust in motion. Emily is the beneficiary. POA will be revoked. The sky is blue again. I sat still, watching Maple. Leaves drift onto the grass. A trace of lavender carried on the breeze the scent I thought only lived in memory. In a place considered the final stop of a life, I had found the first turn toward freedom. And for the first time since stepping into Silver Grove, I felt the light wasn't just coming from the window, it was coming from inside me. 3 days after the garden meeting, I received a thick, cream-colored envelope, unsealed, labeled simply, Documents for Lydia W. Tiffany thought it was junk mail and slid it across the meal tray. You've got mail, probably some insurance spam. I smiled and took it gently. Thank you. I waited until she left the room to open it. Inside was a short typed letter and a thin stack of papers, neatly clipped with a brass fastener. Mrs. Lane, the ticket has been verified. The anonymous claim process has begun. Legal name on file, Lydia Westfield. All accounts are opened at a private bank within a secure system for a blind trust. After taxes and administrative costs, the net total is $43.4 million. The new will has been formalized. All documents previously signed or interfered with by Mr. Daniel Lane now void. Please maintain absolute confidentiality until I contact you again. Andrew Benson. I read each line over and over, like someone holding her own birth certificate for the first time. 43.4 million. I couldn't picture what that number looked like in real life, but it wasn't just money. It was proof that I still existed, that my signature still had value. That afternoon, Tiffany stopped by with a bright smile. You look happy today? Good news? I closed my notebook and smiled kindly. Nothing much. I just remembered the pumpkin pie recipe my husband loved. Aw, that's sweet, she said, and left. I was getting better at harmless answers. I had learned how to make them believe I was gentle, clueless, and safe, just like a soldier once. Learned to hold his breath on a battlefield. Whenever they asked, "Do you need anything?" I smiled. Just a little sunshine. Has your son visited? I answered, "He's probably busy, young people, you know." Every answer was soft and harmless, easing their suspicion. Meanwhile, each night I documented my progress in small, even letters. Day 12. Lottery ticket verified. Alias Lydia Westfield active. Blind trust established successfully. After taxes, $43,400,000. Emily receives a small portion, locked until age 30. New will effective. Daniel has no authority. I looked at the line, "Daniel has no authority," for a long time. It felt like a prayer, quiet but sacred. The next morning, Andrew called. His voice was steady and calm as always, but I heard a hint of relief. "Congratulations, Lydia. Everything is on track." "May I call you Andrew?" "Of course, Margaret." I laughed softly. "Thank you for action. Not forgetting my real name." He continued, "I want to remind you, do not contact the lottery or the bank directly. All channels go through my office. One small mistake and your anonymity is gone." "I understand," I said. "After years of being controlled by others, I don't intend to ruin this myself." He paused for a few seconds, then said, "I've sent a copy of the new will. It's sealed under the name Lydia Westfield, but the contents reflect you entirely. From now on, you have rights not only over your assets, but over your life." I didn't answer. I just felt my eyes sting. I've signed dozens of papers in my life, contracts, insurance, savings, but none ever felt like this. One small sheet, enough to erase a betrayer's claim to power over me. That night, I sat alone by the window. Hall light spilled onto the tile, long as a trail of time. I took the last document from Andrew's envelope, a copy of the order nullifying the old power of attorney. In the upper left corner, a red seal stood out, revoked and replaced. I set my finger on it and felt the raised lines. "Do you see this, Richard?" I whispered. "They don't control me anymore." I didn't cry. I just felt lighter, as if a stone I'd carried for 10 years had finally slipped off my chest. But this joy wasn't for showing off. I knew one careless word could topple the tower I was building. Daniel might not be as smart as he thinks, but he knows the smell of money. So I began to play the perfect mother in his imagination. Whenever Tiffany asked if I wanted to call my son, I nodded. Yes, of course. He's always busy with work. Once, they connected me. The call lasted exactly 2 minutes. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said, overly cheerful. "You doing okay? Are they feeding you well?" "Very well, Daniel. They're taking excellent care of me here." "Good. I just want you to be at ease. Clara and I are planning to sell some old stuff. Do you need excellent today? Anything saved?" I paused a beat. "No need, honey. Keep whatever you need. I already have everything." I heard a faint exhale on the other end, the sound of someone who thinks he's winning. "I'm glad you feel that way," he said, and hung up. I set the phone down and smiled. Yes, I already have everything, just not in the way he thinks. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote a new line. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to reclaim my name." I wrote those 4 words slowly, shaping each stroke. I used to think that if I got old enough, I wouldn't need dignity anymore, just peace. But it turns out, you can't have peace if your dignity is buried. One late afternoon, I called Emily. It had been nearly 3 months since I'd last heard her voice. "Grandma?" Her voice was bright, a little husky. "I can't believe you called. I just wanted to check on you, sweetheart." "How's school?" "Good. I'm working part-time at the library. The pay is small, but I like being around books." I laughed. "Just like me back in the day." "Are you okay?" "I sent letters, but I guess they didn't deliver them." "I'm fine. Just a bit cold." I wanted to tell her everything, the ticket, the trust, the name Lydia Westfield, the future I was quietly rebuilding for her. But I couldn't. This secret, if it reached the wrong ears, could burn everything down. "I miss you," was all I said. I miss you too. When I'm allowed, I'll come visit. Don't worry, honey. Things will get better. I heard wind on the line and pictured her face in the afternoon sun, eyes bright just like Richard's when he was young. When the call ended, I held the receiver for a long time, listening to the dial tone like the slow heartbeat of something coming back to life. Night fell. I stitched up the pocket of my gray coat, the place I kept everything important. The stitches were straight, and even I was still deft, it seemed. When I finished, I opened the drawer and took out 3 papers: a copy of the will, the revocation order, and a small note from Andrew. I folded them neatly, slipped them into the pocket, and tied off the final thread. Now, even if someone searched my room, all they'd see was an old woman sleeping in a worn coat. No one would know that inside that fabric was my entire life reborn. I lay down and listened to the wind outside the eaves. Silver Grove was the same place. White walls, disinfectant smell, dragging rubber soles. But inside me, something had changed. The first day I came here, they said, "You'll be safe here." Now I knew safety doesn't live in walls. Safety lives in knowing who you are, and in no one having the right to take that away. After more than a month at Silver Grove, I learned the most important thing: how to exist without letting anyone notice I was watching. I didn't ask questions, didn't comment, didn't attend group therapy. I just sat still, smiled, and watched. And in that silence, the whole world of this place came into sharp focus before my eyes, raw, broken, and chillingly real. In the mornings, when nurses walked the hall with the med carts, I noticed the pink pills were always short by one in the tray. The recipient didn't remember, and the giver pretended not to see. One day, a skeptical patient asked, "I took a different kind yesterday, didn't I?" Tiffany, the blonde nurse, just smiled, syrup sweet. "Sweetie, don't worry. You're mistaken. Pills are all the same." I noticed that every time Tiffany said "sweetie," it meant she was irritated or hiding something. She used her gentle tone like a cover to stretch over her holes. The elderly here had no choice but to believe, because there was no one else to trust. And Mr. Keaton, the administrator, always walked into a room with a proper smile. He had a habit of placing a hand on people's shoulders when he talked, as if to prove he cared, when really it was to mark territory. "We're here for you, Mrs. Slane," he said during the most recent room check. "Silver Grove is your second home." I nodded and smiled like a good student. "Yes, except I don't have a key," he laughed, not sure whether I was being sincere or sarcastic. At noon, when housekeeping came through, I saw Owen, the cleaning guy, quietly roll his cart into a corner of the hallway, pull out a small bottle of liquor hidden in a clean trash bag, take a gulp, swallow hard, then spray air freshener to mask the smell. I said nothing. I didn't write it down. Not because I was complicit, but because I didn't need attention. At Silver Grove, whoever makes noise gets watched, and I needed to be absolutely invisible. In the afternoon, I walked the garden. Hazel sat on a stone bench, a purple wool scarf around her neck. She said softly, "They can't see you, Margaret." I smiled. "I hope so. Invisibility has privileges," she said, voice rough. "You see it all, hear it all, and no one remembers your face. That's the power." I nodded. Hazel always understood without me saying much. One Saturday morning, Tiffany came in, cheerier than usual. "You have a visitor today, Mrs. Lane." "Your son." I looked at the door. Daniel stood there. Blue shirt, glossy shoes, paper bag in hand like a dutiful son visiting his mother. But to me, he was a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice warm in a practiced way. "Are you getting used to it?" I nodded, smiling lightly. "Everyone here is very kind. You don't have to worry." He pulled a chair across from me, set the bag down. "I brought some of those waffles you like." Oh, and I've been thinking about the property taxes on Elmwood Street. The house has been empty so long, and the taxes are high. I looked straight into my son's eyes. What do you plan to do? Sell it, Mom. Keep it simple. I have a buyer interested. The money will go into a joint account. You'll still get your share. When I heard my son talk about selling the house I had protected my whole life, my chest tightened. Maybe it wasn't the walls I mourned, but the realization that my love had been priced. What about you? In that conversation, was there a sentence that hit you the hardest, one you can't forget? Tell me in the comments below. I want to know what your heart felt when you heard a son speak to his mother like that. I gave a thin smile. A joint account? Like the house papers, right? Daniel froze for a second. Then his voice shifted softer. Mom, I'm only trying to help. That house is run down. No one's taking care of it. I was quiet for a few seconds, then said slowly, I found a piece of paper in an old coat the other day. He blinked. What paper? A paper that you'd be very interested in if you knew what it was. His face paled just a flicker, but he couldn't stop it. What paper? He asked again, voice higher. I shook my head and smiled. Nothing, just a piece of paper. But I'll keep it safe. He stood, stiff. Don't worry me, Mom. I just want you to be stable. I have to go. All right, I said. Drive carefully. The door closed. I stayed seated, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. Inside me rose a taste both sour and sweet, like someone who set a trap successfully, yet still felt sorry for the creature that walked into it. That afternoon, Hazel looked at me and asked softly, "You're smiling more than usual today. Something happened?" "Nothing, Hazel," I said. "I just remembered an old lesson." "What lesson?" "When people think you're weak, let them. The longer they think it, the less guarded they are." She nodded, cloudy eyes brightening as if she understood better than anyone. That evening, I opened my small journal under the dim yellow light and wrote, "Daniel visited. Same smile, same voice, same words. He wants to sell Elmwood Street." I mentioned a paper in my coat. He turned pale. Another brick in the wall. I closed the notebook and blew out the light. In the hallway, Tiffany's rubber soles sounded again, along with her familiar call. "Sweetie, meds time." I chuckled softly in the dark. Maybe for the first time since I came to Silver Grove, I wasn't afraid of that call anymore, because I knew I had become part of the wall, a crack in the system they couldn't see. And from the shadows, I was rebuilding my world, one brick at a time. That night, the phone in my room rang softly. I grabbed it quickly, not wanting to wake Hazel. "Grandma?" Emily's voice was small, shaky. "Dad said he's going to sell your car, the silver one Grandpa bought you back then." I closed my eyes. "That car, Richard picked it for me and said, 'It fits your hands.' I heard it at dinner," Emily rushed on. "I didn't want you to be blindsided." I took a breath. "Thank you, sweetheart. Don't worry. I know what they'll do before they do it." "Are you okay?" "Better than ever." After the call, I sat in the dark. A light breeze slipped through the door crack, carrying the smell of lavender from the garden. I laid a hand on my chest and felt my heartbeat steady. No fear, only quiet resolve. I opened my journal and added one last line. The car, another brick in the wall. Every move they make, everything they take, only strengthens the foundation I'm building. Then I closed the notebook and set it on the nightstand. Outside, Silver Grove burned bright all night, but I knew that in that very light, no one could see me. I had become invisible, and in that invisibility, I was stronger than ever. The last evening I saw Hazel awake, she sat in the corner of the table, leaning over a wooden chair, hands trembling as she poured tea. Mint and licorice mingled soft and fragrant, filling the small room. "Tea helps you remember who you are," she said, eyes far away. When people take everything, you still have the right to stir your spoon your way. I laughed. You sound like a philosopher. Philosophers are long dead. I'm just a survivor, she rasped. Hazel always had a way of steadying me, as if here, in this place where people are treated as burdens, charts, and cases, there was still a shard of soul that wouldn't go out. That night she taught me a game called If You Had the Key. Pretend, she said, eyes shining behind thick lenses. If you woke up tomorrow and found the front door key, what would you do first? I was quiet for a moment, then said, I'd brew a strong coffee, throw the windows wide open, and walk to the bus stop. Hazel smiled, eyes bright like a child's. See? Imagination is the first step to freedom. She touched my hand lightly. Hold on to that answer. One day, you'll have the real key. The next morning, the hallway was unusually quiet. No rolling carts, no Tiffany's forced laugh. When I walked past Hazel's room, the door was shut. The nameplate Hazel C. had been removed, leaving a pale strip of adhesive on the frame. Tiffany, I asked softly, where is Mrs. Hazel? She hesitated for a moment, then gave me her practiced smile. She was transferred. Family picked her up this morning. Family? I repeated. She said she had no one. Yes, sometimes the files are wrong. Don't worry, the new place is much better. I didn't ask more. But by noon I went back down that hallway and saw the room already empty. Fresh sheets, a wooden wardrobe gaping open, no trace of the purple scarf, the thick book, or the mint teacup. Everything gone in just 1 hour. I sat on the chair outside the door, staring at the emptiness, tears falling without a sound. I knew. Hazel hadn't been transferred. Hazel had left this world quietly, neatly, like someone who never wanted to bother anyone. No announcement, no funeral, no goodbye, only an empty chair and the faint scent of mint tea still hanging in the air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my notebook and wrote, Hazel is gone. No crying, no photo on an altar. She lived like a shadow, and when she left, she faded into the dark. I understand now, if I don't leave this place, I'll disappear like her. I sat a long time by the window, watching the hallway lights ripple on the wall like small waves. Each light was a trapped soul, barely breathing inside a tired shell. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably still having dinner with Clara, talking about selling the house and the car. They thought I had given up, that I was living out my dim last days. They didn't know Hazel, my last friend here, had left me the greatest gift, the urge to live for real. The next morning, I secretly wrote Andrew's phone number on a small slip of paper. I folded it and quietly slid it under Nora's pillow. Nora, almost blind but with a frighteningly sharp memory. Nora, I whispered as I helped straighten her blanket. If one day I'm no longer here, and someone asks about me, please give them the paper under your pillow. Nora nodded, her voice thin as a breath. I understand. Not everyone who disappears is lost. Some leave to find their way. I smiled and squeezed her hand. That's right. I decided to postpone my legal appointment with Andrew for 1 week. I needed time to think, not because I doubted him, but to be clear with myself. I needed to be sure I wasn't running away out of fear, but stepping forward for freedom. I spent the afternoon in the garden, watching the sky turn gray, fingers tracing the teacup Hazel had given me. I pictured her sitting beside me, with that tired yet gentle smile. I remembered the game, If You Had the Key. If I truly had the key to Silver Grove now, I would unlock the door, step outside, breathe real air, then go find a window facing the ocean, or just a small window in a shabby rental. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it belonged to me. That night I wrote a new list, simpler than ever, things I will leave behind. Revenge. The need for an apology. Waiting to be validated. Things I will take with me. A window. A key. A name. I stared at the last 3 lines for a long time. A window freedom. A key agency. A name self. Those 3 were what Hazel taught me, with only a few cups of tea and one simple question. The next day, Tiffany brought in my meds, cheerful as always. "Mrs. Lane, feeling better today?" "I'm fine, thank you. Aren't you going to the garden? Weather's lovely." "I will, but after I make tea." When she left, I poured all the pills into my palm. 1 pink, 2 white, 1 orange. I didn't take them. I dropped them into the trash, as lightly as tossing away a few grains of sand. Then I brewed a pot of mint tea and set 2 cups on the table, 1 for me, 1 for Hazel. I lifted my cup and whispered, "You were right. Imagination is the first step to freedom, and I'm about to take real steps." At night, I heard the wind at the window, the soft patter of rain on the roof. I pictured Hazel somewhere, making tea, smiling down. I closed my eyes, my hand gripping the edge of the blanket. In the dark, I saw more clearly than ever. If I didn't leave, I would become like her, a name removed from a door, an empty room, a life packed up in 1 hour. No, I couldn't let that happen. Not to me, not to the woman named Margaret Lane, who had once lost everything and was now learning to step out of the shadows on her own 2 feet. The next morning, I woke early. The world was still misty. The night shift had just left. I sat up, folded my blanket neatly, and straightened my coat. In the pocket were 3 papers, still intact: a copy of the will, the order revoking the POA, and the note that read, "Window Key Name." I smiled and touched the pocket as if touching my heart. "Rest well, Hazel," I whispered. "I'll live the rest of this life for both of us." And I knew it was time to prepare for the next step, leaving Silver Grove. Not by escaping, but by walking out as someone with a name, with rights, and with a future. 2 weeks after Hazel's death, the air in Silver Grove was still thick with disinfectant, but inside me, another scent had risen, the scent of preparation. I had spent enough time watching, learning, waiting. Now it was time to pull the first thread from the skein. Daniel and Clara had wrapped around me. One quiet morning, Tiffany brought a thick envelope stamped with the Harborstone Realty logo in the upper left corner. "Mrs. Lane, you've got mail," she said, setting it on the table. "Looks very professional, probably some agents." I nodded, keeping my face dull. "Thank you." Tiffany didn't know that envelope. Wasn't a coincidence, it was bait Andrew and I had prepared carefully. Inside was a letter of interest to purchase Elmwood House, my old home, valuing it at $1.35 million. The tone was polite and formal. "Dear owner, Harborstone Realty expresses sincere interest in purchasing the property at 12 Elmwood Street. The area is being developed into a high-end residential district, and we are prepared to negotiate within a range of $1.3 to $1.4 million, depending on condition. Please contact our office directly at 617-428 XXXX. Ask for Mr. Andrew Benson, legal representative of the company." I read it 3 times, then smiled. Andrew had gotten every detail right: embossed logo, heavy stock, a postmarked envelope that looked authentic. But the most delicate touch wasn't in the letter, it was in the recipient. The letter wasn't addressed to me. It was sent to Clara Lane, who was living in that house and who was always home at 10 a.m., the exact time she usually went live to cook and show off the vintage kitchen my mother-in-law gifted us. The courier wore a proper delivery uniform, arrived on the dot, and knocked 3 times. I could picture it: Clara in a silk dress, mid-sentence, "The secret to a good soufflé is..." Turning to take the letter. her face freezing at the words, "Offer for purchase, 12 Elmwood Street." She would definitely open it immediately, before ending the live stream. That afternoon, Emily called, her voice a mix of amazement and delight. "Grandma, Dad and Mom are freaking out. Someone just sent a letter offering to buy the house for over $1 million. Mom says sell it, Dad says don't touch it because your name's still on it." I let her spill it all out, then answered gently, "Not everything they stand on belongs to them, Emily." There was a few seconds of silence, then a small laugh. "Grandma, what are you doing?" "Sometimes people need a reminder of where they're standing, sweetheart." That evening, the phone rang in my room. This time it wasn't Emily. Daniel's voice trembled, hurried. "Mom, did you get a letter from Harborstone?" "They sent it by mistake. I'm handling it." "What letter?" I asked, feigning innocence. "The purchase offer. They're saying $1.5 million. Don't worry about it. I'll deal with them." "Oh, but I'm still the owner, right?" He went quiet for a few seconds. "Yes, legally you are." "But the power of attorney, I remember revoking that," I said slowly. "They should call my lawyer, not you." Only his heavy breathing remained. "Mom, you have a lawyer?" "Yes," I said. "A real one, not someone who lies to get my money." He hung up without another word. The next morning, I went to the common room where Tiffany was arranging papers for the routine assessment. "Tiffany, I need a copy printed," I said evenly. "A letter confirming I have not authorized anyone to sell property in my name, Margaret Lane." "Oh, of course. Who should I send it to?" "I'll send it myself. Just print it on Silver Grove letterhead, please. People believe those more." She smiled, unsuspecting. When the printout came, I reviewed it carefully, signed it, and placed it in a small envelope. But I didn't seal it. I made sure it sat right on the edge of the desk, exactly where Mr. Keaton, the administrator, usually stopped to sign forms late in the morning. As expected, when I returned, the envelope was gone. That afternoon, I sat in the garden watching sunlight filter through the leaves. Andrew called, his voice low with contained excitement. "They've reached out." Clara called the office this morning, sounding panicked. She asked if my firm truly intends to buy the house. I said we're reviewing the legal status and need the lawful owner to confirm. I gave a small laugh. "Good. The fish has bitten. What would you like me to do now?" "For now, silence. Let them marinate in their fear." By evening, Daniel called again. "Mom, please meet with me." "Just once." I sat in my chair, listening to the rain on the eaves, his voice cracking over the line. "I don't understand what's happening. They're saying I don't have the right to sell the house." "I think someone's manipulating you." "I'm still perfectly capable of manipulating myself," I said calmly. "If you want to meet, speak through my lawyer. As for Elmwood Street, you should learn how to live without it." I hung up before he could say anything else. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote, Day 18. Andrew sent Harborstone letter. Clara reacted as predicted. Daniel panicked. I sent the no authorization letter, one fish on the line. I'm waiting for the first thread to pull free. I set down the pen and listened to the steady rain outside. Silver Grove, a place meant to isolate, was becoming the center of a quiet chess game. And I, the piece they thought was a disposable pawn, was now directing the moves. The next morning, Tiffany spoke in a low voice as she handed me breakfast. "Mrs. Lane, someone called yesterday asking to verify your residence. Said they were legal representatives." Sounded intense. I smiled lightly. "Really? I'm just an old lady who grows plants. Nothing to get intense about." Tiffany shrugged and left. I looked out the window. The first light of day hit the glass, reflecting my silhouette thin, small, but standing straight. Outside, the breeze stirred the lavender trellis, each purple bloom trembling like a small promise of freedom. I knew that from this moment, the first thread had truly come loose. Once it started unraveling, the whole skein wouldn't stop, and when that happened, I would no longer be invisible. I would be the one pulling the light back. 3 days after the purchase offer from Harborstone through the lane, household into chaos, Silver Grove suddenly felt busier. I heard the click of high heels, smelled expensive perfume in the hallway, strange scents in a place that usually smelled only of disinfectant. Tiffany popped in, beaming brighter than usual. "Mrs. Lane, you have special visitors today, your son and daughter-in-law." I set down my teacup and smiled faintly. Oh, how rare that they remembered me. When the door opened, Daniel and Clara walked in, as if posing for a Happy Family magazine spread. Daniel in a charcoal suit with a blue tie. Clara in a cream silk dress, clutching a large designer bag, glossy red lips, and a pasted-on smile. "Hello, Mother," Clara sang, voice bright as a commercial jingle. "You look much healthier." "I'm not dead," I replied softly. Daniel gave an awkward laugh and pulled out a chair. "Mom, Clara was worried about you. We wanted to check that you're okay. Are you eating well?" "Fair enough," I said. "Not as many good dishes as when I cooked." They exchanged a quick glance, the look of two actors afraid of blowing a line. Clara launched into her performance. "Mother, I really regret leaving you here this long. I want you to move back home. We can rearrange the living room and hire a private caregiver. You'll be so much more comfortable." I didn't answer. I just smiled. They needed me to believe, or at least pretend I did. "That's right," Daniel added smoothly. "I've spoken with a lawyer about the property taxes. If you agree, I can move all assets into a joint fund to protect you, you know? You won't have to deal with paperwork or agents bothering you." "A joint fund?" I asked again, slow and mild, as if tasting each word. "And who holds the key?" "I do, of course." "But everything is for you." Clara took my hand, her pink polished nails pressing lightly into my skin. "You know I've always loved you like my own mother." I looked at that hand, the same one that once pushed aside the soup I cooked, the same one that locked the door to the home I built. Then I looked into Daniel's eyes. A quiet silence stretched thin. Finally, I set my hand over Clara's and gently lifted it away. "You two are very good actors," I said softly. "If there were an award for fake filial piety, you'd win first place." Both froze. Daniel tried to smile, but it crumbled at the corners. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not dead, and this is still my life." The room fell so silent I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Tiffany stood outside the door, unwilling to step in. Clara blinked, her face stiffening. Daniel tried to regain composure. "Mom, we're just trying to help. If you don't trust me, at least you say help, but what you want is to take. You can't help anyone if you haven't learned to stand on your own feet." My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold and clear. Clara shot to her feet, flustered. "Maybe she's tired, Daniel." I looked at her and gave a thin smile. "Yes, I'm tired of watching you try to look good when your hearts are empty." Clara looked away, grabbed her bag, but Daniel stayed seated. He looked at me for a long time. For a moment, I saw something like regret in his eyes, or was it fear? I couldn't tell. "I'll come back," he said quietly. "Your choice," I replied. "But next time, bring your real face." A week later, Daniel returned alone. No suit, no smile. A dark sweater, messy hair, circles under his eyes. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me. "I'm sorry. Clara shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have." "Good. At least this time you're speaking in your own voice, not hers." He gave a weary half smile and looked down. "Are you angry with me?" "No. I'm disappointed." He looked up, eyes tired. Mom, the other day you said you found something I'd be interested in. Can you tell me what it is? I looked at him for a long moment, then answered, fangs hidden behind a smile, Daniel. What you mistook for weakness was only waiting to bite back. He sat still, hands clasped tight. Mom, I'm not trying to take from you. I don't know any other way. I know. But you chose the easiest way, taking from the person who loves you most. He turned his face away, voice thick. Clara told me to do it. She said you weren't lucid. I cut in, gentle but firm. Don't blame the doctor or anyone else. No one forced you. Everything has a price. He was silent. In the weak afternoon light, his face looked both strange and familiar, the boy who once ate cookies in the Elmwood yard, but with eyes sanded down by life into gravel. After a while, he asked quietly, Do you regret it now? Me? I gave a soft laugh. I don't regret it. We're not okay yet, but at least now we're honest. Daniel nodded, his eyes red. He stood, walked to the door, then turned back, saying nothing, only bowing his head deeply. The door closed behind him, leaving me in the quiet room. Tiffany poked her head in, about to ask if I needed meds. I waved her off. That night, I didn't write in my notebook. No need. I just sat by the window, listening to wind slide through the window seam, carrying a faint trace of lavender. I touched my chest, where my heart still beat, slow and steady. Each beat a reminder, I am still here. No one, not even my son, gets to deny that. In life, some battles need no gunfire. The right silence at the right time and one true sentence is enough to make the mask fall. I closed my eyes gently. My liberation didn't begin with a scream, but with a smile that knew I had already won. 3 weeks after my last meeting with Daniel, Andrew called me early in the morning. His voice was calm but carried that familiar urgency. Margaret, he said, the court has set a date to hear the petition to revoke the power of attorney. The hearing will be next Thursday. Don't worry, I'll prepare everything. I was quiet for a moment, then answered, Are you sure they'll listen to an old woman locked in a nursing home? Andrew gave a small laugh. Not only listen, they'll have to take down every word. Because this time, you're not begging. You're claiming what has always been yours. That sentence tightened my chest. For years, I'd grown used to bowing my head, ducking the waves. This time, I would walk up on shore soaked, but standing straight. That morning, Tiffany helped me pick out clothes. She didn't ask much, just looked at me longer than usual. Do you have an important appointment? Yes, I said. I have a conversation with my own life. She chuckled, not understanding, and didn't dare ask more. Andrew arrived in a sleek black car, the back seat smelling of new leather. He opened the door and helped me in, careful, as if lifting something more precious than money. Are you ready? I've been ready since the day they locked the door. The courtroom was small, with a low ceiling. Light from the windows stretched a yellow band across the dark wood floor. Only 6 rows of benches. Everything was so simple it calmed me. Daniel was already seated on the other side, in a black suit with a loose tie. His head was bowed, hands clasped, looking strangely small. Clara was nowhere in sight. Maybe she knew this place had no room for performances. The judge, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a stern gaze, entered. We all rose. He sat, voice firm. We are here on the petition to revoke the power of attorney held by Mr. Daniel Lane over Mrs. Margaret Lane. Counsel for the petitioner, proceed. Andrew stood. His voice was clear, steady, without theatrics. Your Honor, my client Mrs. Margaret Lane was coerced into signing a general power of attorney, without counsel, without an independent psychological evaluation, and was then placed into a care facility against her will. We submit financial records, correspondence, and a copy of the listing email offering the sale of the Elmwood House property sent from Mr. Daniel Lane's account. He produced a thick file, every section tabbed. The rustle of pages sounded like cool blades cutting into the truth. The judge glanced through, frowning. "Do you have evidence she was forced into the facility?" Andrew nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. This is an audio recording from a nurse's cell phone and a statement from an EMT witness confirming Mrs. Lane was alert, objected to admission, but was transported under family authorization." I looked at Daniel. His shoulders flickered. He avoided my eyes. Andrew continued, "We also submit an independent psychological evaluation from a physician affiliated with Boston University. Conclusion: Mrs. Margaret Lane is fully lucid, oriented to time and place, and understands the legal consequences of her actions." The judge gave a small nod, turned a few more pages, then looked at me, voice low. "Mrs. Lane, anything you'd like to add?" I stood. My hands trembled a little, but my voice didn't. "Your Honor, I only want to say this. I am not ill. I was betrayed. They didn't take me for treatment, they took me to make me invisible. I never signed anything of my own free will. And today, I'm here to take back my name." No one spoke, just the light tap of a pen on the bench. The judge studied me, then nodded. "I understand, Mrs. Lane." He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Lane, your response." Daniel swallowed, his voice tight. "Your Honor, I only wanted to protect my mother. The doctor said she wasn't well, and Clara, my wife, said if we didn't do it, she'd lose all her money. I wasn't trying to take anything. Do you have proof of that?" the judge asked. Silence. Daniel's clenched hands went pale. After a few seconds, the judge leaned back, took off his glasses, and spoke clearly. "The court finds no basis to conclude that Mrs. Margaret Lane lacks capacity. All powers of attorney held by Mr. Daniel Lane are revoked effective immediately. The court orders a freeze on all related accounts and recognizes Mrs. Margaret Lane as the sole lawful owner of the property at 12 Elmwood Street." He struck the gavel. One short knock, but it echoed far. I sat still for a few seconds, as if my heart had just been cut free from a cord that had cinched it for years. Andrew looked over and gave a small nod. "It's done." I looked at him, smiled faintly. "No, Andrew, now it starts." As I stood, Daniel stepped closer, lips twitching. "Mom, I don't need the money, I mean it." I looked at him, the window light on the face of the boy I once lulled to sleep. "Good," I said slowly. "Because you will never touch it." He wanted to say more, but I had already turned away. My steps were firm, lighter than the hallway breeze. Outside the courthouse, sunlight spilled over the steps, bright gold. I inhaled, lungs filling like it was the first true air I'd breathed in years. Andrew walked beside me, silent. He knew some victories don't need celebration, only quiet to feel them. I looked back at the little courthouse, narrow windows, weathered roof where a period had been placed on the long sentence of being locked up in the name of love. On the drive back, the road curved through rolling hills. Afternoon light fell over brown roofs, fields of bright yellow grass, and gray fences. A deer darted across the road now and then, light as breath. No one spoke. The steady engine hummed like an old lullaby. I closed my eyes and thought of Richard. When we were young, he used to say, "When you're tired, drive toward the sunset, then stop wherever the air smells like water." Maybe that's exactly what I was doing now. When the car rounded the last bend, a small white cottage by the lake appeared. Green shutters, purple vines climbing the porch, a thin ribbon of smoke rising from the chimney like someone had just put water on to boil. I opened the door and stepped out. The lake breeze was cool, smelling of water and lavender, and it felt like I was breathing in my lost youth. Inside, the house was tidy and bright. A white curtain swayed. On the birch table sat a steaming teapot, mint and licorice, Hazel's scent. I didn't ask who prepared it. I didn't need to know. Some gifts are meant to be received in silence. I hung my coat on the hook and sat by the window. Late sun spilled honey gold across the table. I took out a new notebook and opened to the first page. The pen shook slightly, but the letters were clear. I was never small. I was made small. I set the period and closed the book. There was nothing left to prove. That first night in the new house, I didn't lock the door. Wind on the porch and the lake's small waves made a wordless song for someone newly free. I lay in bed and listened. No nurse's footsteps, no call bells, no syrupy voice saying my name. Only a pure quiet I'd never dared to dream of. I fell asleep to tea and cold air, my heart light, as if everything heavy had fallen off behind the gate of Silver Grove. The next morning, I woke early. Sunlight slipped through the shutters onto the pale wood floor. Birds chattered in the garden. The lake lapped softly. Butter hissed in the pan. I made coffee, sliced bread, spread butter, and ate alone. No questions, no instructions, no rushing. And in that silence, I felt freer than ever. After breakfast, I sat down to write letters. In front of me were three things: a thick envelope with copies of the Lydia Westfield Trust, an old photo of Richard and me, taken at the Elmwood house the day we finished the first porch roof, and a 4-page handwritten letter for Emily. I wrote in my familiar hand, slow, like round, speaking. Dear Emily, by the time you read this, I may be somewhere else, a place you don't need to come looking for. Only trust that I'm at peace. I'm leaving you something no one can take, the chance to live the way you choose, without leaning on anyone. When I was young, I thought love meant giving everything away. Now I know real love is keeping enough for yourself to stand. If you see a silver key in the envelope, keep it. It opens a lakeside cottage where I'm living. Someday, when you need quiet, come here. There's always a teapot ready in the kitchen. I signed, Grandma Margaret. Then I slipped in the photo and the trust envelope, tied it with a blue ribbon, and wrote on the front, to Emily Ross, do not open in a hurry. I took it outside and handed it to the mailman passing along the dirt lane. Please send this to this address. He nodded. You got it, ma'am. As the postal truck disappeared behind the pines, I stood looking over the flat, lake, sunlight stretching like a golden ribbon. I took a deep breath, fingers playing with the silver key at my neck. No more prison, no more accusations, no more walls. Only me, a small white house, and a life beginning again at 72. I went back in and poured another cup of tea. On the open page of my notebook, I added a small line. Freedom isn't loud. It asks only for one deep breath, one open door, and one person brave enough to step through. I set down the pen and looked out the window. The sky was as clear as when I was 20. And I knew that, for the first time in years, I was truly living. That morning, I opened a drawer and saw the original lottery ticket, the thing that started it all. The paper edges had yellowed, corners frayed, but the numbers were still sharp. 6 small numbers had turned my life down another road. I sat a long while, fingertips tracing each printed row, then gave a small nod. There was no reason to keep it anymore. I picked up scissors and cut the ticket into tiny pieces carefully, slowly, like closing an old chapter. The scraps fell to the floor, light as dust. I felt no regret, only a strange, clean space inside me. I whispered, "Thank you for getting me out of the cage. Now rest." At noon, I called the Highland Senior Foundation, the organization Richard used to donate to. A young, polite male voice on the other end sounded a bit surprised when I said my name. "This is Margaret Lane," I introduced myself. "Or, if it's easier, you can call me Lydia Westfield." A brief pause. Then he asked, "Which program would you like assistance with, ma'am?" I smiled. "I don't need assistance. I want to fund," I explained. "I wanted to start a new initiative, Second Voice, a program to help older adults abused by family or manipulated out of assets regain control over their lives." "It doesn't need to be grand," I said. "It just needs lawyers, therapists, and a phone line people can call when their voices have been taken." The staffer was nearly speechless. "Ma'am, that's a wonderful idea. We'll draft the agreement right away." I smiled, my voice light as the breeze. "Good. I don't need my name on any wall. Just make sure anyone locked up in love has a way out." That afternoon, I turned to something else. On the table in the golden light was a folder for a new grant, the Richard Lane Grant. It's for people 55 and older who want to learn a new trade. I remembered when Richard retired. He'd said, if I still had the strength, I'd learn carpentry. Nothing is sadder than leaving the old to live only on the past. So I did it for him, for everyone who's been told it's too late to begin again. I signed Margaret Lydia Lane, set down the pen, and felt a warm hush inside. In my memory, I heard Richard's soft laugh. "You always do what people think you can't." That evening, Emily called. Her voice shook. "Grandma, I just got your letter and the envelope. I don't know what to say. Thank you." I smiled. Gentle. "No thanks needed, Emily. You just need to live safely and kindly." She sniffled. "Grandma, I miss you so much." "I miss you too," I said, "but now you have to learn to stand on your own. I only need to know you're safe." "I'm safe," she whispered. That was the sentence I'd dreamed of hearing, not from my son, but from a granddaughter who understands me with her heart, not with her interests. After that call, I wrote another letter to Daniel. Not long, not bitter, just clear and cool. "Daniel, I'm no longer angry, and I no longer pity you. Life will teach you what I could not, that you don't lose power by giving, only when you let someone take your self-respect. Everything between us has been resolved. Do not attempt to contact me again. I wish you peace, but I will never return to the place you locked me." I CC'd Andrew so he could file it, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted everything recorded plainly, without sentiment. The next day, I stopped by the town post office. I brought a small, folded note. Inside were Andrew's phone number and the line, "If someone needs help, give them this number." I didn't hand it to the foundation. I gave it to the young mail carrier, the one who often delivered to Silver Grove. "Do you remember Mrs. Nora?" I asked. "The white hair, thick glasses?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Next week, when you bring the root there, discreetly give her this note. Only her." He looked at me and nodded. "I understand, ma'am." I stepped out of the post office and drew a long breath. I can't save everyone, but if one person, just one, can step out of that locked shadow the way I did, it will be enough. The day after, Andrew visited. "You'd like to keep the alias Lydia Westfield on file, correct?" "I don't want to hide." I said, "But I do want to choose when I appear." He smiled. "So you want both identities formalized?" "Yes, one for work, one for rest. I have the right to live two lives if I choose." 3 weeks later, the certificate authorizing the use of the trade name Lydia Westfield was delivered to me. I looked at it and smiled. Now, if someone asks who I am, I can answer, I'm the person I choose to be. That afternoon, I walked down to the beach near the cottage. The sky was crystal blue. The waves were soft. The water threw back the sun in 1,000 silver shards. I stood for a long time, bare feet in damp sand, wind threading my hair. I lifted my head and looked out where the horizon melted into the sunset. "Richard," I whispered, "my name has come home." No answer came, only waves and the salt stealing into old memories. But I knew somewhere. He was smiling. I picked up a small stone and tossed it lightly into the sea. It skipped a few times, then sank. Like the past, it doesn't vanish. It settles into the deep, no longer hurting me. Night fell. I sat at the table and lit a small candle. The open page waited. I wrote the last line of the new chapter. Money can't buy back the years, but it can buy your own silence, the one thing I never had. I paused, looking at the words. Wax ran in two bright tracks, like time dripping down. Then I closed the notebook and set my hand over my heart. It beat slow and even, unhurried. No more bitterness, no more schemes. Only the quiet of someone who has lived long enough to know freedom doesn't need to be loud. I smiled the first smile that didn't have to hide behind pride or defense. Outside, the sea breeze slipped through the cracked open window, carrying the salt and the sound of waves. I closed my eyes and heard my heartbeat blend with the wind. And I knew after 72 years I was truly free. One October morning, with fog still hanging over the lake, I went back to Silver Grove. Not out of nostalgia, but because of a promise I once wrote to myself that I would leave in silence, but return with a voice. The iron gate was the same. White paint, peeling in patches. On the sign, the word Silver had faded, only Grove remained, bare like a memory not yet gone. I didn't go in. I stood outside, looking at the windows that once kept me in the name of care. I handed the security guard a thick, carefully sealed envelope labeled, "To the legal department, no reply needed." He looked at me, a bit surprised, then nodded. Inside that envelope were lawful resident complaint instructions for older adults, a list of resident rights, and a handwritten letter from me. If someone is brought here one day and thinks they have no choice, open this envelope. Inside is a path to help them find their voice again. No one is allowed to lock someone else's heart and call it love. I didn't sign my real name. I only wrote, "Someone who once..." I lived in room 214. I didn't look for Tiffany. I knew she still worked there, but I didn't need to see her again. Some pasts should be closed gently, like an old door that shouldn't be knocked on anymore. I walked slowly along the path, lined with maples shedding their leaves, hearing the soft rustle under my feet like a tender farewell. At the gate, I took a deep breath. The air outside was cool and clean, just like the first time I walked out of Silver Grove, only this time, I chose to turn away. No send-off, no goodbyes. That afternoon, I went home, where the roof on Elmwood Street had just been repaired and the fence freshly painted. On the table lay the court order I had just sent to the brokerage that tried to list my house without permission. White paper, black letters, neat and final. All transactions, advertisements, or transfers related to 12 Elmwood Street are permanently suspended. Sole owner, Margaret Lane. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt at peace. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with the knock of a gavel, but with the quiet of someone who no longer fears losing anything. I called a carpenter and asked them to fix the porch swing, where Richard used to read the paper every morning. When the carpenter asked if I wanted a new bench instead, I shook my head. No, keep the old creak. It's the heartbeat of this house. That evening, after they left, I made tea and took it out to the porch. I set another small cup on the table. The chair beside me was empty. "This one's for Hazel," I whispered. The tea's scent drifted into the cold air, mingling with wood and aged lavender. I sat still, almost hearing a soft laugh beside me. I opened my notebook and read out loud to no one but myself. No one has the right to lock you up and call it love. No one is allowed to take your voice and call it protection. And no one can define freedom for you unless you let them. I read each word slowly, letting them glow. In the night like small candles, growing brighter inside me. Wind from the lake swept by, carrying flickers of light across the water. Those little sparks, like lost pieces of a life, were coming back, shimmering without needing any apology. I lifted my eyes to the sky. The heaviness was gone. There was only light, water, and my own presence. That night, I didn't write a journal entry. I wrote only one line on the last page of the new notebook. My name is Margaret Lane. I have my own voice. And from now on, every choice in my life will be mine. Then I set down the pen and gently closed the book. The next day, I sat on the porch with a hot cup of tea in hand. Sparrows perched on the railing. The morning sun sparkled on the lake. I thought of everyone who ever believed they had no voice, people treated as burdens by their children, their relatives, even by society. I want to tell them this. You still have a voice. You still have the right to choose how you live, at any age. They may never hear me, but if someone, somewhere, is watching or reading and recognizes themselves, then this voice hasn't been in vain. If this story touched you, I'd like to know where you're from. Leave a comment, even just "I hear you" is enough. Because sometimes a single reply can save someone from feeling forgotten. And if you have ever been, or are now, locked inside something called care, share what you would do if, at 72, someone locked the door and said it was out of love. Thank you for staying until the last moment of this story. Your presence tells me this voice is not meaningless. If what I shared matters to you, please like, subscribe, or share this story so someone somewhere knows they aren't alone. Because every comment you leave, every share you make, is a key that opens a door for someone still trapped in silence. I lifted my cup and smiled. The wind brushed the lake again, the light melted into the water, and I knew I was home.